If there is anything we've learned about life, it's that life is complex, layered, and seldom ever black or white. The same goes with the history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and even our experience within the church today. The church and the history of the church is not like a Disney movie. The realities of life, history, and even faith are nuanced and intricate. Nuance. Let's talk about that word a little bit. The term nuance refers to complexities that may not be immediately obvious, but are important for a comprehensive understanding. Nuance encapsulates the gray areas, the depths that cannot be quickly or superficially understood. Often, it requires patient deliberation and reflection. Sometimes, it requires a bunch of study, long conversations, and researching the context of a situation before we can even start to understand the complexities of the church, especially church history. Let's take, for example, David from the Bible. In primary, we were taught about David and how he used a rock and a sling to defeat Goliath. David was the man. We looked up to him. We were taught to be like him. David was a freaking prophet, man. And then we realized that he committed adultery. Things don't become so black and white as they once were when we were kids. Maybe we feel a little bit betrayed by David. Like, David, you were so strong. You were so obedient. You literally had the power of God with you. Why would you do such a stupid thing? When we try to wrap our heads around this, we start to understand that stories are much more complex than we once thought. Nuance is introduced, and we need to figure out what to do with that. We think about Thomas Jefferson. He was one of the founding fathers, the principal author of the Declaration of Independence, and he had a huge role in shaping the foundation of the United States. Yet, this very man owned slaves. It kind of leaves a bitter taste in your mouth, doesn't it? Or think about Abraham Lincoln. He was the president responsible for ending slavery and steering the country through a civil war. He was one of the greatest presidents who has ever lived. But adding the nuance and complexities into the story, we realize that his views on race and equality evolved over time. He had views that would be considered prejudice in our day and age. He also made decisions that resulted in a lot of people dying. How can this be the same Abraham Lincoln we were taught about as kids? A common misconception in today's day and age is to view things in stark contrast, to think that two truths cannot coexist. However, the reality shows that two things can be true at the same time. The complexities of church history show this. On one hand, they show divinity working with people. On the other, they highlight the flaws and imperfections of those God chose to work through. The older we get, the more we learn, we have to realize that we live in a nuanced world and a nuanced church. It's complex. We have to graduate from primary, grow up, and realize that nothing around us is as simple as Sleeping Beauty or the Three Little Pigs. I once heard a quote that says that every bit of sadness that you will ever feel will come from an unfulfilled expectation. I think that if we have the expectation that the church's history is like a Disney movie, or that there can't be any maturing in our learning and understanding as we grow up and or begin to talk complex things that children's brains just aren't able to understand or comprehend, I'm afraid we'll be severely disappointed. Personally, I love learning about the complexities of church history because it helps me to examine and try to figure out what someone's intentions may be. It's like a game or a puzzle. From a distance, it may not look right, but once you start to connect the dots and put the pieces of the puzzle together, you start to see the bigger picture, and you start to realize things that you would never have before, such as how human church leaders actually are. There are so many misconceptions that people have about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that can't be understood without diving deeper to try to understand, such as, wow, the church has a lot of money. Guess you guys don't actually want to help people. Or, wow, Brigham Young said some racist stuff. Guess he wasn't a prophet after all. Or, Mormons believe they can become gods and have their own planets. Or, Mormons can't drink coffee or tea, so they must be against caffeine. When in reality, it's much more complex. Nuances have helped me to realize the following. I've realized that prophets aren't God's puppets. They're complex, messed up humans. I've realized that it's easy to sit by and judge from the sidelines. It's much more difficult when you are actively involved in trying to restore a church. I've realized that the church is still being restored. The restoration isn't complete. There are still pieces to the puzzle that have yet to be found. I've realized that people are not just good or bad. Most of them have good intentions, even if they may do bad things in the process. Humans are infinitely complex. Sometimes we do bad things with good intentions. Sometimes we may even do good things with bad intentions. Each one of us can be seen as a protagonist or an antagonist depending on the point of view. I've realized that what works for one person may not work for someone else. A super intense prophet who singes eyebrows may be exactly what one person needs and may be exactly what another person wants to run away from. Nuance has helped me to realize that what we automatically assume usually isn't the full picture. Like when Joseph Smith was sealed to a 14-year-old girl. Our automatic assumptions kick into gear and we assume wrong things without taking a step back and adding context to the situation. I've realized that we need Republicans and Democrats to make society and the church move forward. We need to be progressive on certain things, and we need to hold fast to conservative values with other things. If either side crumbles, we all crumble. Imagine trying to row a boat with only one oar. Without the other oar, the boat will just go in circles. Both oars are necessary to move straight ahead, much like how political parties are essential for balanced progress. Jesus enveloped the best virtues of both political parties, and we should do the same. I've realized that as humans, we are very emotionally driven. We feel very powerfully. What one person may feel totally okay with, another person may feel totally betrayed by. I've realized that respectful discourse isn't sexy. It doesn't get the most likes, clicks, views, or shares. Polarized, controversial, and charged viewpoints do. This is so sad to me because I feel like it's exactly what the devil wants, and most people are just being fed by the palm of his hand because they want popularity, money, fame, and a boost to their ego. I've realized that some people who have been rooted in their beliefs for the majority of their lives may not ever budge. Some people in the older generations may believe that Joseph Smith never practiced polygamy because they may have lived their whole life with that belief. I've realized that beauty can be found in complexity. I've realized that the Savior recognized complexity and he found out ways to make it simple and to help us to understand, such as using stories or parables. I've realized that some people may be presented with the exact same two facts and come to two wildly different conclusions. I've realized that nobody will agree with you on everything. I've realized that people's life experience will influence how they perceive certain things. I've realized that character is more important than a checklist. Who we become to God is more important than checking things off a list. I've realized that some prophets were heavily influenced by the societal and cultural norms of their time. Now, this is not an attempt to make excuses or to justify actions, but to better understand intentions. So, where does this leave us? If so much in the church's history is so complex, how can we find peace? Have we all just been betrayed because we've realized that nothing in the world is as simple as when it was taught to us when we were kids? I think that with these complexities all around us, we can still make an easy decision for a difficult situation. Like my good friend Al Caraway has said, I had already chosen who I wanted to follow by getting baptized, and had already recognized that this lasting joy only came from the gospel. In a complex world, there is simplicity in following Jesus. In a nuanced church, there may not be answers to all of our questions, but there is Him. He is there. And personally, I want my testimony to be rooted in Him. I've had too sacred of experiences with Him to deny the things that I've felt, and the relationship that I've built with Him completely overwhelms any complexity that exists in the church. Now, I hope that I can clearly communicate the fact that the impact of the personal sacred experiences that I've had doesn't negate anyone else's experiences, and vice versa. I can have a certain belief and not judge others for believing differently. My testimony is my own, and it should not be forced upon anyone else. It is not my job to convince others of what I believe to be true. Only the Holy Ghost can do that. If you don't believe what I believe, I'm not going to try to save you or convince you or say, I'm right, you're wrong, argue with you or any of that. All I'm saying is that the deep and profound spiritual experiences I've had have changed everything for me. I'm not just talking about warm fuzzies here. I'm talking about feelings and emotions that have altered the course of my life because of how powerful they are. And it's not even a one-time thing. I continue to have incredibly significant experiences all the time that just further solidify my testimony in Jesus Christ. Now, I don't want to preach to you. I don't want to condemn you or say that your experiences aren't valid if you haven't felt what I felt. Of course, your experiences are valid. I just believe that once someone has had contact with the divine, it changes them. In today's fast-paced world, where we're so often asked for immediate reactions and snap decisions, quick judgments, and fast actions, it's genuinely heartwarming when we can take a step back and embrace the messy, confusing bits of life. After all, isn't it during our most clouded moments that our faith is truly tested? But here's the thing about faith. It's not always sunshine and roses. Sometimes it feels like fumbling in the dark, hoping that you're headed in the right direction. It reminds me of something that I heard once that says, faith isn't just about believing that things will be fine, it's about being fine even if they aren't. Going through life, it's pretty clear. Growing up and learning can be a hot mess. I mean, even the prophets from our scriptures weren't always on point. They had their struggles, they made mistakes, and some of them were heavily influenced by the culture of their time. But guess what? I believe God was right there, working with them through their flaws, just as He's here for us now. And if you ask me, that's the most uplifting part. Jesus is out here, helping us make the best of our messy, complicated selves. In a world that's quick to highlight flaws and point fingers, Jesus reminds us to be a little bit kinder, a little bit more understanding, to take a step back and to try to see the bigger picture. We might not have all the answers, but we do have Him. In a world full of complications, His love for us stands out like a beacon. And I think that there's beauty finding simplicity in that.